Hello and thank you for joining us on today's Media Hub. I'm your host, Don D. Sanchez, and today we'll be talking about how to get your foot in the door in the television and film industry. So if you just graduated from film school or if you've always been interested in getting in the industry but didn't know how, well, this episode is for you. Joining us today is a dear friend of mine, someone who I've known most of my career. He's a respected pioneer in the TV and film production here in Central Florida, and he has a passion for educating people about the industry. So without further ado, let's welcome my friend, Randy Baker. Hey, Randy, how you doing today?
Hey everybody, great. I'm doing wonderful.
Well,
Good to
Randy,
be
I
here.
know I know you've been busy, and I kind of brought this on you last minute, but you're always there whenever I call, so I just want to say thank you for that. But I know you, but the viewers don't. So I just want to start off by, why don't we just tell people a little bit about yourself, the history and how long you've been in the industry, things you've done.
Well, I've been in the industry for about 50 years. I started when I was very young at 13. I grew up in rural Indiana, not someplace you would think of as the starting place for somebody with a film and career in film and television. But, I was, if you are familiar with the Steven Spielberg film Super 8, that was kind of my childhood. I grew up, I got my first camera when I was 13 with a paper out. I bought the camera with the paper out, and so I kind of turned my back neighborhood into a backlot. And so I was lucky enough that I had a high school that was brand new, and the Indiana Higher Education Telecommunication Act of 1972 required them to have a television and a studio and a radio station. So in this little small town, we had this incredible high school that had a radio station and a television studio in it. So I got started in that, and it was my high school teacher who actually said to me, "Hey, you're pretty good at this. You could do this for a living." And it's something, growing up in a small town where easily 60% of the kids I went to school with were farmers. That's what they did, or they worked in a factory after they got out of school. So right away I thought, well, okay, this is what I want to do. And I was practical. I got a dual degree in secondary education and film and television. It's called telecommunications back then.
Yeah.
But my senior year I had one class left. I'd already got a degree in television, and I was working on my final class and for the secondary education, and I got hired as a production assistant on a documentary series for PBS with this really small but very talented crew. Peter Davis, who just won a couple Academy Awards for Hearts and Minds and Selling of the Pentagon, a young up and coming DP named Haskell Wexler, and an AC named Paul Goldsmith, and a up and coming production manager who went on to work with Steven Spielberg and all those guys right after the film. So as soon as I did that, I spent 3 months working on that documentary series, and I came away thinking, I don't want to teach. This is what I want to do for a living. So
Right.
I got a job working for a local television station. I lived in my family's house, and spent the summer working about a year working at a local CBS station,
Mm-hmm.
and quickly rose up through the ranks. I got a
Yeah.
job because I knew how to run a quad machine, a
Right.
2-inch quad machine, which was the technical end of things, and then it was a fast turnover of the station, and so I moved up there, and the station had a 40-foot production truck, the only one in the Midwest. So on my weekends I was out learning how to shoot sporting events and concerts and stuff. And then I moved to Florida because I heard Florida was going to be the Hollywood East.
Mm-hmm.
And plus, I had a girlfriend out here, so that helped. And so I moved to Florida and started my production career here. Worked at small production companies. I started out working midnights doing duplication of film to tape transfer on this huge $250,000 device called a Ranks and Tel flying spot scanner. And we
Right.
did a lot of early Disney films. We transferred them from 35 millimeter film to video for distribution. And then I kept my ear to the ground and realized that a production company that was doing a lot of work with that company was getting a new Disney Channel, the very first Disney Channel a television series called Epcot Magazine. So I went to them and said, look, I'll work for you for free. That's it. And so they hired me as a A2. And then by the end of the second season, that our company I was working for took over production of the show, and I became a production executive running that production company. And from there, it was just production company after production company. And I worked for a lot of Fortune 100 and Fortune 500 companies, and
Yeah.
also spent about 10 years at Nickelodeon, where I met you. And then I went
Right.
from Nickelodeon to Adrenaline Films, one of the larger production companies here in Central Florida.
Yeah.
And then, after about 5 years there, I went back out on my own. And for about the last 20, 25 years, I had my own production company,
Hmm.
and I got into the reality show end of things, which we thought all was going to be a fad and going to
Yeah. And
only
here
last a
we are
couple years.
still. Exactly.
200 series later, literally 200 series. We added them up not long ago. It was just a little over 200 series. Um, you know, uh, Still doing reality shows. I've been executive producer and a producer and a director and a DP on just a ton of reality shows. And for the last 7 years, I've been teaching digital cinematography full sail. So that's my 50-year career in a nutshell.
It's I can't believe you got that much in that time, because I mean you unloaded a lot right there. And I just want to point out, like, when I first saw your shot, I was like, I don't want anybody to think that behind you is fake,
No, that
right?
I maintain one of the largest private collections of cameras in the world.
And how
I
many
own
are
about
back there?
cameras. Well, there's about 1,000 in my office here, but I have a very understanding wife who allows me to have two other rooms in the house. And I've got one room that's all box cameras, and I've got one room that's all film cameras, like Super 8 and 8 millimeter, 9 millimeter, and 16 and 35 millimeter film cameras.
Wow.
So I also that's the library, and in that library, I also have about 1,200 books on film and television. So I collect books as well. So
Unbelievable.
well,
Unbelievable.
my wife says when I die, she's going to have one hell of a yard sale.
So you unloaded a lot there, especially in the beginning. Like, I just realized that our history, some of it's the same. Like, high school is what determined what I was going to do. I ended up taking a film production course in high school. And really, I just took it because it was 2 credits, because I was going to go into marketing. And then I was like, oh, I actually fell in love with it. I was like, this is definitely what I want to do, because of my high school film and TV, or it was just really television production. It wasn't even film. But in there, I learned everything. We learned everything from script writing to editing, and we had our shows ended in public access channel in a small town in Connecticut. And then you also said something about in news. So I worked in news too in the very beginning, and to this day, I think that's one of the best foundations. I don't know about now, because I've been out of news so long, but
Yeah,
I always loved it because it cross trained you in everything. A lot of
yeah,
people look down on it, but if, especially in the beginning, when you're trying to get your foot in the door and learning how to work things, to me it was one of the best foundations, because they cross train you and everything. Because if somebody misses, doesn't come in, they could just put you anywhere. And with me, I was probably the worst teleprompter operator in the world. That's what I learned on, and it was the old crank one. The new internal, where all the computers were linked up so everybody could share notes and stuff, had just came out. So I would do the 6 o'clock morning news, right? In my, believe it or not, my highlight of my news career was when Mike Tyson got out of prison. That was kind of like my highlight. Everything else was just the same. It was, to me, I learned a lot, but it was like Groundhog Day. You do the same thing at the same time every single day. But I
right.
did learn a lot because I got cross trained a lot. So I do think that that's a good foundation for people that want to get into the industry, for
It is.
sure.
We talk about that all the time, and you and I have a mutual friend, Randy Schaefer, who started
Yeah,
in the news as well. And we
exactly.
talk about this. We're old news guys.
Mm-hmm.
I learned how to shoot news, and so when you have to shoot and edit, and so you learn how to tell a visual story quickly. And then
Exactly.
I got the technical side of that in the production engineering, and then of course having the production truck. I got like all this experience for a couple years going out every weekend shooting live events, and so it was the first year I was out of school. It was just one of those things where I thought, you know can't get any better than
Yeah,
this.
yeah, for sure. So let me ask you this: what you have students that you work with all the time now, right? Being a
Yeah,
teacher.
I teach about
So
1,000, 1,200 students a year, teaching them how to do digital cinematography from the very basics. Every student in my class gets a Sony FX6 about 4 days before my class starts.
okay,
So we teach them the very beginning basics of composition and visual design, the technical aspects of photography and cinematography, and then how to operate the gear, and then how to get started in the industry, how to go out there and start making your way.
right. So what advice do you give your students, and what advice would you give the viewers on how to break into the television and production industry?
Well, I grew up, I had some mentors that were really, instrumental in my growth. And so one of my mentors taught me early on that he was a UCLA grad, and, that everything in this industry is task oriented. There's critical task and there's non-critical task. So everything's broken down into tasks. Things that you do that are critical tasks, like if you don't put together a resume and send it out, that's a critical task. You can't get a job. But the other things like going out and joining a professional organization, you don't have to do that to get a job. But the more of those non-critical tasks that you do, the better your chances are. So you really, you have to start out by understanding what you want to do and figuring that out, and then knowing the industry, and then making a checklist of all the things that you need to know and do to be successful. Critical and non-critical tasks. Critical tasks are things they absolutely have to do to get a job. Non-critical tasks are all those little things that set you apart from everybody else that will really help you. So that's one of the big things, and that includes knowing the industry. I mean, I find that beginning people coming into the industry don't know the industry, and knowing the particular market that you live in. Okay, so everybody lives in a particular market, and I'm always reminded of that Sam Kinison, who told this joke about people living in the Sudan who were starving, and he said, if you don't want to starve, move someplace that has food.
Right, right. The
And it's the
obvious.
same.
Yeah,
It's the same place. If you want to be in the film industry, you're not gonna get, Paducah, Kentucky.
right.
You're not gonna have a great film. But if you move to Atlanta, or you move to New York, or you move to LA, then you're gonna be there. So move, if you can, I tell this to students all the time, move. And of course, right now the big place is, Atlanta. That's the rockin' market. $8 billion last year,
I know.
in production thing. And so then know the vertical markets. That's the other big thing. I just don't see people understanding the vertical markets. And when we talk about this,
Yeah.
what we talk about, and you and I have talked about this before, where if you just look at the film market, okay, everybody wants to go. Either I want to be in film or I want to be in television, but there's so many other vertical markets. There's the corporate end of things.
Yeah.
There's event videography. There's local television. There's
Yep.
PBS television. There's within each of those, there's all kinds of little individual vertical markets. And so I say to people all the time, go out there and really, make a list of all the vertical markets in your
Right.
area. There's medical, there's educational, there's Department of Defense, there's government. It goes on and on. It,
Yeah,
it really goes
it's
on
really
and on.
endless now. It's not
Yeah.
like it
And,
used to
and
be.
so and think outside of the box.
Yeah.
Don't I have friends, fortunately just recently passed away, a guy named Steve Campbell that was a good friend of mine growing up in the industry here, who was the DP on The Walking Dead. He got started working for a company called Photomart,
Oh
which was an
wow.
equipment
Yeah.
rental company.
Yeah.
He started as an equipment rental guy, and I say
Yes.
that to people all the time. If you're in a big city, or New York or someplace like that, go to Able City Tech or go to one of the big rental companies. If you're in Boston, go to Boston Rule,
Yeah.
and start working for those guys. If you're working in a rental company, not only do you get to know all the gear, the
Yeah.
latest gear, the state of the art gear,
Absolutely.
but you get to know all the people who are coming in renting that gear. And if you're good and you help those people out, it doesn't take long for them to go, hey, if you ever want a job or you ever want to come out and work on a shoot, come and join us sometime. So
Yeah.
it's a matter of just thinking outside of the box. And I say this all the time to my students, this is the best time ever to be a visual storyteller. everybody needs video. Everybody. I mean, we talked about feature films, and we talked about television, we talked about the corporate market, we talked about event videographer, local television. But we didn't even touch on the whole internet thing.
Yeah.
That's everybody who has a website needs video.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, everybody can go out with their cell phone and shoot video, especially now with, cell phones becoming more like digital cinema cameras. But it's not just a matter of having the gear,
Yeah.
is understanding the craft.
Right.
So that leads me to the next point: get an education. I follow a lot of industry trades and websites and stuff. There's a guy out of India named Sharish Wolfcrow. His website's called Wolfcrow, and he recently just said on his website, you don't need to go to film school. All you need to do is go out and get yourself a DSLR, and you can become a filmmaker. And I actually, I never commented on those things, and I wrote to him and said, "You are an idiot." You can't be telling people that kind of stuff. Sure, yeah, 1% of the people that are maybe motivated and smart enough to be able to go out and do that, but
Right.
you need an education. You just
Right.
need an education. And then the other big thing that you and I probably have talked about a lot before is know who's doing the hiring. Okay.
Yeah.
So know who the hiring. Everybody goes, "Oh, I'm looking for production companies." If you go and know how to look for things, okay, and that's part of knowing the industry, knowing the big, if you don't know who Production Hub is, if you don't know who Mandy's or Kim's or Backstage or any of those sites are, you're already behind. Those are
Right.
the big databases where you can go and find anything you want to know about any market and any company in there. But I find that people who go there, they start looking at like, okay, who are the production companies? Or they may go, okay, I'm going to look at who all the best DPs are in the area.
Mm-hmm.
Let me
Contact
ask
them.
you a question: who does the hiring on a television show and a feature film? Who does the hiring? Production coordinators
Yep.
and production managers.
Right.
So nobody ever looks at those people.
Right.
Get to know those people. And of course, where do you find those people a lot of the times? In industry professional organizations
Yeah.
like Women in Film. Go to Women in Film and join Women in Film,
Yeah.
get to know all the professional organizations. So it's just a matter of going through that and knowing all those things, knowing your market, knowing the industry, knowing all the resources that are out there, looking at all the vertical markets, knowing who's hiring, and then figuring out who all the professional industry and trade associations are that you can go out there and join and become part of.
Yeah. You know how I actually got into Nickelodeon is it was hard. My first year out of school was terrible, terrible. I think total. If I told you how much I made the first year out of school, you'd laugh. If it wasn't for my wife, at times her job is the one that brought in really all the money the first
Yeah.
year. So I would actually watch the shows, right? And I'd wait for the credits, and I'd be like, PM, who's the production manager? Boom, got his name, and then I'd call. And since I had a name, it was like I knew him. I'd be like, yeah, can I talk to you? At the time, I don't want to say a name because he's not there anymore or anything, but I'd be like, say, can I talk to so-and-so? You're like, yeah, and they put me right through, right? And then from there, I would go in and I would give him my spiel. And of course, it didn't work. Be like, oh, well, we don't have anything right now, but call next week. And I say, okay, what time? And if you said 2 o'clock, sure enough, that day on 2 o'clock, I was calling. And I did that for 1 year. One
Yeah.
year, I would call all the PMs to all the shows. You know how many shows they had back then. Back then, I mean, they were the best television network for children. They were beating everybody. So it got to the point where as soon as they heard my voice, they knew who I was. It was. I'm sure I stalked them. At some point, it got to the point like that. So when I finally got in at a show, when we did Gullah Gullah, I finally went around to everybody and I said, hey, I just want to apologize. I introduced myself to them, put a face to a name, but I had to apologize for stalking them for that 1 year. But, you do what you got to do. One thing that I had learned was like, if you give up, you're just never going to make it, especially that
Right.
first year. You got to be persistent. You got to be persistent on getting in there, which brings me to my next question. So internships, right? Internships and apprenticeships. What do you think? And even volunteering, because today I don't see it as much. Because you said something about going out there and just doing stuff for free sometimes, right? Just to get your
Yeah.
name in. I did so much for free my first year, just so I could meet people, just so I could do things, so I could get on sets. I mean, I, I, I couldn't tell you how many free things I did, but it paid off in the end, right? And today I feel like the labor force or the workforce just doesn't want to do that. What would you say about that?
Well, we have this discussion a lot with beginning students, who are starting out, and so, but I just want to reiterate what you said about not giving up.
Yeah.
I say that to people constantly.
Mm-hmm.
This is not easy. Okay,
Right.
it's not easy, and so you have to have this tenacity about sticking with it. Anything that's worth its salt, is going to take you time. And this is, unfortunately, what happens today is, we have a generation of people who instant gratification isn't soon enough. It's not. They
Yeah.
want to learn something right away, and to a certain extent, I'm that way. But this industry is not that way. This
Yeah.
is not something that you're going to pick up in 3 months or 6 months or a year or a couple of years. This is going to take you a while to get good at it, and you
Yeah.
just got to know that. So starting out for a lot of people is like, how do I start out if I don't have any experience? Well, go out there and volunteer, and do internships and do apprenticeships. And you know one of the big things that you'll hear me talk about over and over again is find a mentor. That totally helped me. I didn't always pay attention to the mentors, but all that stuff stuck with me. I had a
Yeah.
mentor in college who used to tell me, look, you're never going to get anywhere in this business unless you realize one thing: it's a business first, and it's a creative outlet second. And I was like,
Yes.
yeah, 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 Ricardo, I got it. Yeah, yeah. And then I got out of school, and I was, holy crap, this guy knew what he was talking about. I was like, I need to know the business side of this
Right.
as well. So that's it. But learn how to do. And so it's like anything else. You got to be smart about it. Okay. There are a lot of people out there that are just looking for free labor, and okay,
Right.
you don't want that.
Right.
So pick and choose. Because of the job market right
Mm-hmm.
now, you have a lot of opportunity to pick and choose the type of internships you want to do, or the, apprenticeships you want to do. And let's be clear about this. This is all about the craft.
Yeah.
I can teach anybody the technology in 2 or 3 months. It's going to take you years to learn the craft. It's
Yeah.
all about the craft of visual storytelling. That's what it's all about. And so that's why there are so few really good visual storytellers out there, because it takes a long time to learn that stuff. You have to know all kinds of stuff. You have to know the technical side. You have to know the aesthetic side. You have to know the business side. You have to know, and in the business side, it's all the marketing and the sales, and,
Mm-hmm.
the finances and the tax and all that stuff. So you have to know a ton of stuff. Okay.
Right.
To do that. But pick the internships that you want to do. And so even me, after I got out of school, I'd been out of school for 20 years. Um, I think I was working at Adrenaline as president of the company, and I had the school call me and say, hey, you got one class left for the second degree. Do you want to ever finish this up? And so I went to the local film office here, the EDC, and said, hey, look, I know you guys want to do a production library. I need to do a class. Can I do an internship with you guys? And they were like, sure. Sheena Fowler was the intern at the time.
Oh
Sheena and
wow.
I were the two interns at the EDC. And so I spent 3 months going out and shooting 30,000 photos of the area in conjunction with them. They gave me a list of things. And while I was doing all that, I was also shooting video. And so at the end of it, I culled it down to 10,000 photos, and I did an internship.
Yeah.
This was 20 years into my career. You and I know this. I do free stuff all the time. For
Right.
me, I love doing this. It's what we call a jobby. It's a job that's a hobby for me. I would still be doing this even if they didn't pay me. They just pay me very well to do this, so
Right.
that's an added bonus. But I want people to kind of have the life that I have. I wake up every day and go, okay, what cool thing do I get to do today? What
Yep.
cool person do I get to meet? What cool place do I get to go? And more importantly for me, what cool thing do I get to learn?
Right.
Because it's a learning experience. I mean, I've learned so much in this industry. I joke that, I don't have any more room in my head up there. I just got all this useless information in
Yeah.
there that I got from working on television shows. I know everything to know about, the Everglades, and about swamp life, and about, antiquing and picking, and, animal veterinarian stuff, all the stuff, all the shows that I've worked on over the years. they say once you do a television series, if you produce a documentary or television series, that's almost like getting a master's degree program. So yeah, go out there and pick and choose the internships and the apprenticeships that you want to do. And there's lots of different things. There's if you go to internship.com, for example,
Mm-hmm.
and you type in, doesn't matter where you live,
Yeah.
you type in virtual film and television internships, and you look at that, you'll see hundreds of virtual internships. They're looking for people, like a lot of my students who have their own gear and can go out and shoot and edit their own stuff. But it's out there, so
Wow.
find the internships that you want to do, and then go out there and really go after that. Um,
I'm gonna have
so
to add
yeah,
that. I'll add that link to the bottom of this.
yeah,
Because that's very good. I had no idea about that. But
yeah.
now that you said about the internships and stuff, but what about if what, are there any organizations or any networking opportunities that you think that they should do that
So
would help
people
them?
used to say to me all the time when I started out, "How the hell are you so busy? You're the busiest person I've ever
That
met in
is
my
true.
life." I was like, I'm on the board of 5 different professional organizations. I sit on the board of 5 different professional organizations. So yeah, there's a lot less today, but if you looked at the DGA.com or you go to any of the big websites like Mandy's or Kim's or Production Hub, all of those list professional organizations and trade organizations and
Right.
also guilds and unions. Okay? Get to know who all those people are. And you may think, "Oh, there's one or two." There's literally dozens of them. Pick and choose what you want to use. The big ones are, for me anyway, the big ones are women in film and television, which
Mm-hmm.
have chapters in almost every major city. And if you're not familiar with them, it's not just women. I sat on the board for 15 years of women in film and television. Now I had a camera and I had a pickup truck, so that may be very valuable to them. But the key to this is not to just go to the meetings with your resume in your hand and say, "Hey, please hire me." You
Right.
know, be professional about it. Have a business card. My father used to say to me all the time, if you want to be successful, make yourself useful. Make yourself useful. So what I tell my students is, if you go to Atlanta Women in Film and Television, look at the board of directors, who the board of directors are
Yeah.
on there. They are the movers and shakers of Atlanta. Tyler Perry Studios, Turner. I mean, all the big studios that are up there. They're represented by people who are in women in film and television.
Wow.
They're on the board. Each of those board members have committees that they chair. Each of those committees are staffed by volunteers. So figure out who the hell you want to work with.
Right.
Look at those people. Go, hey, I want to work for Tyler Perry Studios. Look at who the board member is from Tyler Perry Studios. Go to the women in film meeting. Say to them, hey, I understand you have this committee. Do you need any help? Of course they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, if you're good and that's going to open up the door. And it's like doing free work or doing an apprenticeship. Every one of those things you do is a door that opens for you. Okay, you just got to realize that it's really a numbers game of how many people you can meet in the industry that's going to help. And if you're good, and this is what made you successful.
Mm-hmm.
You were on top of things. You knew what you were doing. You showed up on
Right.
time and early every day, and you worked your butt off, and you met people, and you made yourself useful and helpful to everybody that was around you. You didn't have
Absolutely.
an attitude. And again, that's all part of it. I just did a thing with saw a workshop with G yesterday that he did, and so one of the things that G said, Giorgio Rodriguez, who's a well-known producer, director, DP that we all
Yeah.
know, he said, "I'm fun to work with."
Yeah.
When I'm on the set, people have a good time working with me, and that,
Right.
you're spending 10 to 12 hours a day with somebody for 5 or 6 days a week.
Yeah.
You don't want to be around somebody who's a Debbie Downer. You just don't want that. You want somebody who you're going to enjoy working with. So that's all part
Absolutely.
of it. And
Yeah.
so that's a big part of going out there. But women in film, a PPA. I just had the folks from PPA in my class doing a workshop, Professional Photographers of America. 34,000 professional visual storytellers in the United States. They do their own, convention, Imaging USA. But they do things like the benefits include all these discounts. Plus, you get $15,000 worth of production gear insurance and
Yeah. That's
liability
crazy.
insurance and data loss insurance. And so, when you know those things, and you go, okay, if I'm going to have my own equipment and I'm going to be paying $50 a month for gear insurance,
Yeah.
I can join this organization for $27 a month and get all that stuff plus all and then it's the community.
Yeah.
Get involved with that community, get involved with the film, but don't, think outside the box here.
Yeah.
Again, that's what we're talking about. When I was on the board of 5 different, organizations, it
Hmm.
was the Orlando Ad Fed. It was the Florida Public Relations and Television Association. It was the Florida Motion Picture and Television Association, ITVA, which became MCI, Women in Film and Television, CGRAPH, SIMTE. If you start looking out there in all the different, professional organizations, there's a ton. But don't also, I belong to the Melrose group here, which is the public library. They do all these workshops every week. They're doing a workshop. There's all the meetup groups for film and television that I go to. Model Mayhem. I'm always out there shooting stuff in meetup groups and getting to meet people. And every one of those places I go, I get to meet people. I say this
Yeah.
to people all the time. I worked with a lot of people who never worked with me, that in a professional organization working on
Hmm.
committees and stuff, who never ever worked with me, but they were constantly recommending me for jobs
Right.
because they knew what I did within that organization. They knew of
Right.
that. If I'm doing all this stuff for that organization, then I'm probably pretty good at what I'm doing. And they hear about all the stuff that I'm doing. And, every month I see those people and they're, hey, what are you working on? And I go, this and this. I'm like, well, you're really busy.
Yeah. Yeah.
No, that's it. There's a really interesting thing that I've been working on for a while now. Every if you're at if you take a master's class at Full Sail, at the beginning of every class is called Mastery, and John, God, I can never remember the guy's name. He wrote this book called Mastery, and in that book, he talks about developing your online persona,
Yeah.
who you want people to think of you as. And so he had this social experiment, and it was, I went to a social media convention. Again, conventions are another one of those things that we'll talk about here in a second. But I went to this convention called Mashable. Um, and in that convention, a guy said one thing to me that totally changed everything about social media for me. He said, you want to put yourself out there in front of people. You have an opportunity to create this persona of who
Hmm.
you want people to think you are.
Right.
And you want to put yourself out there 3 times a week. You want to, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday or Saturday.
Hmm.
And what you post during those times are really important. Again, it's making yourself useful. Monday or Tuesday, post something that is educational, that they can learn from, an article that you read, a video that you just saw that really helped you, learn something that you thought, wow, that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
If you think it's cool, somebody else is going to be thinking it's cool. Then Wednesday, middle of the week, post a clip, a behind the scenes shot of you working on a set or on a project, or a short clip of something that you're working on.
Hmm.
And then on the weekends, post something that is more uplifting about somebody who's using this industry to change the world, or something
Oh.
that's kind of light and funny, a meme about the industry.
Yeah.
But the middle of the week thing, posting, he said, in the book Mastery, they talk about, if you post, one thing every week, every Wednesday, people who follow you are going to go, after a month, they're going to go, wow, you're pretty busy. Even if you're only posting one thing a week, they're going
Right.
to look at that and say, you're pretty busy. If you do that for 2 months, people are going to go, wow, you must be doing something right.
Right.
You're doing production all the time. After 3 months, they're going to be going, something's up with this guy. I need to work with this guy. This guy is really on top of things,
Yeah.
even though you're only posting one
One
thing a
thing.
month.
Yeah.
So
Right.
it's all about doing that. And then, the other end of this is, we talked about conventions, is doing, yeah, if you've never been to a professional convention, if you've never been to IBC or NAB or a SeaGraft or Imaging USA, or, I mean, literally there are dozens and dozens of professional things, you know, it's an entire educational experience on itself. The first time I went to NAB, I was there from sunrise to sunset till they kicked me out at the end of the day, all 4 days walking the convention floor, and I still didn't see everything. I still
Yeah.
didn't see everything. And I met so many people. I mean, and it was it. So before I forget to talk about this, this is kind of really important. So for people who are going to professional organizations, one of the big skill sets that I always tell beginning people that they need to know is how to network. And you
Mm.
may think
Yeah.
that everybody knows how to network, but you don't.
Right.
I took a networking class, and it
Oh,
changed my life. I took a class on networking, and it's all the little things that you don't even think about. What side does your badge go on? And
I
so
heard
most people
about
don't
that. Yeah.
realize that.
Yeah.
You
Because when
reach
you
out and
shake a
shake
hand,
their
yeah.
you want the badge to be right there so you can see their name, and so little
Right.
things like that. So what I did was, and my wife will tell you, if I go to a party, she goes, "Watch him; he'll work this entire room." And so anytime I go to a professional event, I make a game of it. I'm like,
Yeah.
how many people can I meet in this short amount of time? And
Right.
so, usually I call it the wingman game, where I go with somebody and I go, okay, let's see how many business cards we can get from people. And so that means that you gotta, have your act together. You gotta know who you are and what you want people to think about talking to you, because you only have a short time to introduce yourself and say, "Hey, I'm Randy Baker, and this is what I do for a living." And
Right.
it's like, why would those people want to talk to you? Because there's a whole room full of people. So you got to become interesting. You got to have kind of a gimmick that you can get people to talk to. And so for me, it's all about knowing the industry. And so anybody I meet, I
Yeah.
introduce myself, I tell them who I am and all the things that I do and blah blah blah. But that's very quick. And then I
Right.
want to know about them, because everybody likes to talk about themselves. Okay.
Right.
So if you can get them to tell you about them, that's what you want to know. You know about who you are.
Right.
You want to know about them. And then before I left every person, I would say, yeah, you kind of have an idea of what I'm doing. Is there anybody in this room that you would recommend that I talk to? And they're like, "Oh yeah, yeah, I go talk to this person." Then I go
Wow.
to talk to that person, and I'm like, "Joe just told me to come and talk to you." And they're like, "Oh, Joe, yeah, I know." So there's an automatic door that opens up.
Let me
So
ask you
it's
this though, because
a game.
that's a good point. Because I am not, especially in the beginning, when I first got into the industry, I am introverted,
Mhm.
and throughout the years, it's gotten much better. But the person that is getting into the industry, but is introverted or doesn't do well around big crowds or things like that, so because you're talking about going and networking and going to events and stuff, what advice do you have for those people?
Well, I started out just like that. When the
Okay.
first couple of meetings I went to, professional meetings,
Yeah.
I was the wallflower, man. I was the guy up against the wall,
Right.
and so couple things. Go with somebody else that you know.
Okay.
Having,
Good
that
point.
wingman kind of thing
Yeah.
really is a big issue. You
Okay.
feel much more comfortable with two people. And
Right.
anytime there's two people and you're talking to a single person, that makes it much easier.
Yeah.
And then, single out the people, do your homework. Okay, know who the people are that's gonna be there. Look at the board members. Know who all the board members are. Look at all the members. Kind of get a feel for who those people are. If you can go up to somebody and say, "You don't know me, but I know this and this and this about you," they're like, "Oh my god, this guy,
Yeah.
he's got it going on." But so the first couple of meetings, I was the wallflower, man. I
Yeah.
just stayed back, and I had my little drink, my diet coke in my hand, and I just watched everybody. And
Yeah.
so that there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
Get a feel for the room,
Hmm.
and who the people are in the room. But bring somebody with you, do your research, and then again, if you can make a game of it, and that's what it's really all about. Go into there thinking, how many people can I meet in the next hour? How
Yeah.
many people? And if you do that, that kind of that becomes
It calms you down a little bit. You have a
yeah.
mission that you're trying to accomplish. Yeah, no,
It's
I
like
like the wingman idea, especially if that your wingman is totally opposite of you. Like he
yeah.
or she has no problem talking to people or going up. You know what I mean? Like that's a good one. I like it.
So
So
I would drag Schaefer to all these meetings, who was not a big social person, and it would the whole gimmick was, this is Randy Schaefer, I'm Randy Baker, they call us Shafe and
shake
Bake,
and
and
bake. Yeah.
we work together and stuff. So that automatically opened up the door, and everybody
Right.
was like, Shafe and Bake, oh yeah, we
Yeah,
know
yeah.
that,
Now here's
so
the thing,
it
though, too, because those of us that know both of you together, like you both can talk to anybody, but even with Randy, I mean, he's even way up here. His energy level is like way up. He'll make anybody seem like
tie a rope around that boy and pull him down from the clouds. Yeah. uh, yeah. So that's
uh,
it. And so again, when you're like that, and
yeah,
you're gregarious, and you can talk to people about anything. It's hard for me. I was like you. I was an introvert. For me, learning how to talk to people, doing that networking,
yeah,
class helped me tremendously. It made
yeah,
me go in there knowing who I was. You got to
right,
know who you are, and you got
yeah,
to know who you want people to think of you as. If you don't know
absolutely,
that, you're kind of lost.
yeah, right. That was very good advice. So here's my
Elevator
next
pitch.
What was
Yeah,
that?
elevator pitch of who you are.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
like
and
people know
actually
elevator
know
pitch.
it. Like I had to study the
I wrote
elevator
it down.
pitch that I actually learned from Score.
Hmm.
I took a class down in Score, which is free, and
Yeah,
you could learn about anything about business, whether it was marketing or sales or anything like that. So I kind of went towards marketing, and I sat down with the guy and everything, and he gave me like just little quick pointers that I took into consideration, and that's where I actually learned how to say, okay, let me do my elevator pitch and let me know it
right.
within, you're supposed to know
So
it by
get
the time you get in the elevator. By the time you get out of the elevator, you should be able to tell, they should know everything about you.
resources like Score and SBA that people don't know about. Like it's the entertainment industry. It's
Yeah.
it's not you got to know it's an industry. It's a job. So you have all these great business resources, and you can't do this industry without the business side.
Right.
You can't.
Right.
And one of the things that I respect most about you is that you understand that and you look at it as a business.
Yeah.
You treat it like a business, and you've been successful because of that.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's really important. Most people don't do that. If you're starting out in the industry, all you're worried about is, where am I going to get a job,
Right.
how am I going to get paid? And then if you're freelancing, and that's that whole freelance versus working for somebody kind of
Mm-hmm.
mentality. If you're freelancing for the first 2 years, you're just freaked out about, where's my next job coming from.
Exactly.
And even if you have time off, you can't enjoy that time because you're freaked out going, I got to
Well,
find a
when's the
job.
next job coming in? Right. Right.
The running joke is, if you're working, you're not marketing and selling. And if you're
Right.
marketing and selling, you're not working as a freelancer.
Yeah.
So you have to kind of, get this mentality of, I got to get away from the day rate kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I got to be more of a, how can I create an income that's going to be sustainable over a year in the, busy times and in the dry times. And then when
Right.
you have those dry times, learn how to enjoy them and have other projects that you can do
Mm-hmm.
that are ready to go when you hit those dry times. Most freelance people are like, I mean, they're not doing their own work. They're not going out there and doing, looking at, building and growing and doing, multiple things. They're just worried about, oh, I'm a freelance AC or I'm
Right.
a freelance DP. That's all I'm doing.
Right.
You can't have that mentality.
Right. And I got to admit, I was like that, especially in the beginning, as you grow in there. Like when I was in school, the last thing I even thought about was owning a business. Like that was not it.
Right.
It was just going out there and working, just like you said. But you brought us right into a good segue into what my next question was, which, so we talked about, securing jobs and everything, but what are some effective strategies for finding work and securing projects as a freelancer in the industry?
Well, first of all, one of the things that I find, and a friend of ours named Abby Ginsburg kind of taught me this, a production
Love
manager at
her.
Nickelodeon and Golf Channel, and
Yeah.
now she's teaching at Full Sail. But Abby is just like one of those people in the industry that is the superstar.
Yeah.
And she was the one who told me that there are production paths, and so a lot of big people starting out don't know that.
Yeah.
So figure out what you want to do. It's like I said before, figure out what you want to do. What do you want to do? If you want to be a DP, then there's a path, right, to
Hmm.
get to becoming a DP. You start out as a lighting PA, and maybe a grip, and then maybe electric, and then a gaffer, and then a second AC, and a first AC, and then a camera operator, and then a DP. So
Hmm.
that's the path. If
Yeah.
you want to be a producer, you start out in the production management path as an office PA, assistant coordinator, assistant production manager, assistant producer, executive producer, showrunner. So there are paths that
Yeah.
you need to know. And
Right.
so, first of all, know what those paths are.
Yeah.
Second of all, know the resources that are available for you to find those paths. And
Yeah.
then you got to develop some skills. Okay, you got to have some skills. That's it. My big skill is common sense. I
You think that
can't
wouldn't be a question, but sometimes you're just like,
it's
oh boy.
how many times it doesn't take it takes you a day on a set working with a crew to know who has common sense and who doesn't have common sense. And
Absolutely.
that's the number one thing, and you
Yep.
can see that right away. And the work ethic is another big thing. I'm a Midwest boy, and I grew up with this strong work ethic, and and I expect that of everybody that I work with.
Hmm.
Everybody that surrounds me should have a strong work ethic.
That's right.
you know And number three is, you know, learn how to go out there and network, you know, master that whole thing of networking, you know. And then number four is learn the business side, you know.
Yeah.
Gosh, I can't tell you how many people I know that started out in this business that are freelancing, and at the end of the year, you know, I've had this conversation where all of a sudden their taxes are due and they owe $4,000 worth of taxes at the end of the first year, and they're like,
They
oh my
freak
god,
out.
you
Yep.
know, you know, I can't do this, you know. And then
Yeah.
they go get a job at a, you know, Outback Steakhouse or you know, Home Depot.
Yeah.
So that's it. And then, you know, tenacity and grit, you
Hmm.
know, that goes a long way.
Yeah.
You're gonna get, you know, there's a lot of rejection in this industry, and you know, and don't give up. You know, when I worked at Nickelodeon, again, working at Nickelodeon was really difficult for me to get into too. Even though
Yeah.
I, you know, at that point had been executive producer of a Fortune 500 interactive, you know, research and development video facility that was really pretty cool. But when I started, it was such a tough thing, that people were not very happy that I was working there. Other camera people, a lot of New York camera people that had come down and worked there, they felt very threatened by me. So it was tough for me. They did things like I'd go to lunch and come back, and they'd switch my controls on my camera so that the zooms and
Yeah. So
stuff
it's
were.
backwards. Oh
Remember that?
man.
You know,
Yeah.
they were brutal about that
Yeah.
stuff, and so took them a while to accept me. But
Right.
once you got into that, you know,
Yeah.
you did that. So have that tenacity and grit. And I got to tell you, there were days where I came away from Nickelodeon, go home on my drive home, going, I suck today. I was horrible today. They're gonna fire me. You know, I'm gonna go back tomorrow, and they're gonna like, you're not good enough. You know,
Right.
but you know, you just got to stick with it, you know, and that's the big thing.
Yeah.
But you know, those are it. You know, the big thing I can tell people, you know, things that you need to really, you know, think about as well. Become a lifelong, you know, learner. You cannot stop learning.
Right.
I remember going to high school with a good dear friend of mine, and we graduated from high school. At graduation, he turned to me and said, "Thank God I never have to learn another thing again in the rest of my life." And I'm thinking,
Yeah.
oh
Where
my
he.
God, that's like
Right.
I can't wait to get out there and learn everything there is to know. So, you know, those are the big things.
Okay.
You know,
Well, that's good. Well, here's the other thing. So you, like you said, you've been so far spanned 50 years, right? And you've seen, I've only been at 30 years, and the
yeah,
change
technology's
in those
changed
30 years,
so much.
dramatic, right? Astronomical, right? So
Yeah.
what do you see? What have you seen it evolve to, right? But what are the trends and the emerging things that you see happening now in our industry?
Well, the business, again, the craft stays the same. So, you know, that's the one thing I'm going to stress to you. Learn the craft, because
Yeah.
the craft, the visual storytelling, is pretty much the same that it's been for over 120 years. You
Yeah.
know, if you look at, you know, the montage and editing techniques and shooting techniques, that stuff is pretty much the same. You know, how to tell a visual story, shot sequencing rules, and you know how to create a, you know, a 3 act screenplay, or a, you know, a 4 or 5 act television show. That's pretty much the same. What's changed is the technology rapidly changed. I remember when I first came here in the '80s and working with a company called Forward Film and Tape. Those guys became my mentors. And, you know,
Mm-hmm.
I remember Brad Fuller saying to me at the time, at that point, if you wanted to get into the television business, you were talking about $250,000 for a
Yeah.
switcher, and then the cameras were 45,000, and the lenses were 20,000,
Mm-hmm.
and the batteries were 1,000. So you're talking $1 million to get into the business. And I remember Brad saying, anybody with a station wagon at about $100,000 can get into the business now. Today, you don't need any of that. You
Nope.
know, you need a, you know, a iPhone 14, you know, or you know, Sony just introduced the new you know, their new camera that is XD cam. It's
Yeah.
basically you're shooting that Cinetone. It's the same specs as, you know, most of the digital cinematography cam. So you don't need any of that. You can edit for free on Magic DaVinci Resolve, which is
Yep.
the state of the art high end editing system, and you can do graphics and audio and color correction. So you can go out there and start creating content, you know, but you still got to know the craft, you
Yeah.
know. That's it. So but the technology is going to continue to change. I mean, obviously camera technology is going through the roof right now. You're seeing that the Sony FX6, which we use once every 10 years, there's a camera that comes along that changes everything. But you're
Mm,
looking at new things like the dual contrast and phase autofocus, which is the best I've ever seen. I've
right.
never taught learn how to use autofocus, but this is better. You're talking about the dual base ISO, which is a total game changer in the industry in terms of camera. Electronic variable ND filters, slow shutter speed. The fact that you can shoot 2 seconds of shutter on a video camera now, mind-boggling. The fact that you're getting like these hybrid gammas like S-Cinetone that give you 10.5 stops of dynamic range versus the standard gammas of 7 or 8 stops, where you don't have to color correct. Sure, you get 14, 15 stops if you're shooting log, but you got to color correct those. So the color gamut and color space is coming in, and that's just on the camera side, of course. And then you've got the big thing that's changing everything is AI. You
Yeah.
know, uh, AI, and so over the last couple of years, we've been heavily involved in virtual technology.
Yeah.
We built the first virtual stage at a school. Spent about $3 million on that stage, and so that's a big thing.
Yeah.
Being able to do virtual production, but that is by far being overshadowed by AI
Yeah.
right now. AI is going to
Which,
change things in so many ways that people
yeah,
have
and you better
no.
embrace it. You bet. We were
You got
talking
to.
about that the other day. You better embrace it because it's not going anywhere.
I use it
It's
daily.
changing the industry. It's
Yeah,
going to change all the industries, but it's definitely changing ours. What I
yeah,
like about it, and the positive way to look at it is not AI, but all these other emerging, or you call them vertical, is like industries is creating so many more jobs for people. You know what I mean? As
yeah.
far as that, there's just so many more outlets that you can go to. Not AI, I'm saying, but like all the other ways, like with virtual, that added so many more positions on building it. If there's taking it down, taking it out, learning the data, being the person to run it,
Sure.
building, and now you're collaborating even more on virtual stuff. Let's say you have to bring in a gaming person, you know what I mean, to build, to build a 3D graphic sets and all that stuff. It's, I love it and I embrace it, but I love
Yeah.
how it's just adding more and more positions for people as well.
I did a big branding campaign for IBM several years ago, and we traveled all over the world and shot, all these different people that were using IBM to, and as part of that campaign, I came up with a slogan for them called "Adapt or Perish."
Yeah,
Okay, you have to adapt or perish. If you have
exactly.
blinders on and you're not learning new technology, and you're not embracing this stuff,
Yeah.
you're not going to make it. And you and I talked about this a lot.
Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of the pandemic, the fact that I knew how to do streaming very well,
Yeah.
kind of, all of a sudden made me in demand. So
Yeah.
all, the school and all the people I know were like, "Hey, you've been streaming for like 3 or 4 years now. Can you come and teach us how to stream?" So that made me a very valuable player in the market when everybody else was freaking out, going, "I don't have any work."
Exactly.
So you got to adapt and perish. So we adapted and adopted the virtual technology early, and I'm telling all my students, learn this technology.
Yeah.
This is the future. This is you're not, everybody goes, well, I'm not going to work on a Mandalorian or an Avatar set. And like that's not where this is going. This is
Right.
going to be going into the corporate market and the educational market and the training market. You're going to see
Absolutely.
small virtual sets pop up over
Yeah.
the next 10 years.
Yeah.
And this is the same thing with AI. Learn how to adapt AI into what you're doing. Yeah, it's going to change things. It's going to get rid of a few jobs. But
Yeah.
more importantly, what it's going to do is going to change how you do your job.
Right.
It's one of the most incredible research tools I've ever seen.
Yeah.
I wrote 15 different scripts in 2 hours, but it took me a while to import all the
Yeah.
information that I wanted.
Yeah.
The thing about AI is that the information you import into it is just as important as
Yeah.
the AI itself. So,
You just
but
gave
I
me an
was
idea. We're going to have to
yeah,
do an episode on it. We'll have to have you
yeah,
back, because that's a whole, if we go down that road, we're going to be here another 2 hours because
it's
it's,
it's crazy.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. But I do want to say, thank you for sure, Randy. I mean, we definitely got to have you back on because, like I said, we could keep talking and talking and talking, but I think you gave so much information, good information to our viewers, and I just want to thank you for the time. And hopefully we could have you back again.
Not a problem. Yeah, and I'll send you a bunch of information that you can put up on the website here as resources for people. I
Awesome.
have just a tremendous amount of resources. I tell people all the time, if you look at my bookmarks on my computer, I have over 100,000 bookmarks on film and television
Unbelievable.
stuff, and so it's a database of information.
Yeah.
So if you talk to airlines like Delta or United Airlines and ask them what their major asset is, it's not their planes, it's their reservation system and their customer system. That's it. It's a soft asset. And
Right.
so you have to kind of look at what you're doing as a soft asset as well by having all this research and material that's available to you that you've got to collect and build. When we started out, one of the things that made me, really well is that really, helped me a lot was I had a major database of everybody's numbers. So if people called me and they said that we're looking for a camera guy, I'm like, here's a database of 20 camera guys in Central Florida. I'm not available. That made me useful to people. So
Yeah.
it's that data that you have as well. So
Yeah.
thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Again, I love doing this stuff. If anybody has any questions or need help, they can always reach out to me.
Awesome. Thanks again, Ray. I really appreciate it. I'm sure we'll have you on again. See ya.
No problem. Thanks. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode and that you took away some key factors on how to get your foot in the door of the television and film industry, such as go out there and meet other people, network with others, join organizations, post content on social media platforms, have a good attitude, and most of all, don't give up. Be persistent if this is something that you really want to do. Well, until next time on Media Hub, I'm Dondi Sanchez.